The letter from the Homeowners Association arrived on a Tuesday morning, and I knew before opening it that my life in Meadowbrook Estates was about to get complicated. I stood in my kitchen in suburban Phoenix, Arizona, looking out at my backyard, where 6 perfectly legal chickens pecked contentedly at their feed. My name is Isaac Warner, and I had lived in this community for 3 years without a single complaint. The chickens had been there for 2 of those years, approved by the previous HOA board under grandfather clauses that predated the current restrictions. But apparently, that was all about to change. The letter was signed by Patricia Henderson, the HOA president who had taken office 6 months ago with promises to restore proper standards to our neighborhood. I recognized her immediately as the woman who always wore pearl necklaces to community meetings and spoke in that particular tone that suggested everyone else was slightly stupid. "Dear Mr. Warner," the letter began in crisp, formal language. "It has come to our attention that you are maintaining livestock on your property in direct violation of Section 7.3 of the Meadowbrook Estates Covenant, Conditions, and Restrictions. You have 14 days to remove all chickens from your property or face daily fines of $500 per violation. This matter is non-negotiable." I read the letter 3 times, feeling my blood pressure rise with each reading. The thing was, Patricia had no idea about the arrangement I had with the Meadowbrook Community Center. Every Saturday morning for the past 18 months, I delivered 4 dozen fresh eggs to the community center kitchen. Those eggs were the star ingredient in the famous Sunday brunches that Patricia herself attended religiously, often bragging to guests about the farm-fresh, locally sourced quality of the food. My chickens were Rhode Island Reds, healthy and well cared for, producing eggs that were legitimately better than anything you could buy at the grocery store. The community center paid me a fair price, and everyone benefited. Well, everyone except Patricia, apparently, who was blissfully unaware that she had been complimenting my chicken's output for over a year. I pulled out my phone and called my lawyer, Marcus Chen, who I had kept on retainer ever since the HOA had tried to fine my neighbor for painting his mailbox the wrong shade of beige. "Marcus, it's Isaac. I need your help with an HOA situation." Marcus sighed on the other end. What did Patricia do now? I explained the situation, reading him the letter verbatim. Marcus was quiet for a moment, and I could hear him typing on his keyboard. "Okay, first things first. Do you have the documentation showing your chickens were grandfathered in?" "I have everything." The previous board president, Tom Morrison, gave me written approval. I have copies of the meeting minutes where it was discussed. I even have photos time-stamped from before the new regulations went into effect. Good. That gives us a strong position. But here's the thing, Isaac. Patricia has been looking for ways to flex her authority. She fined 3 different homeowners last month for violations that were borderline at best. This isn't just about your chickens. This is about control. I leaned against my kitchen counter, watching my chickens through the window. They were completely oblivious to the drama they were causing, happily scratching at the ground in their spacious coop area. "So what do I do?" Send her a formal response citing your grandfather clause. Include all documentation. Request a formal hearing before the full board. And whatever you do, don't remove those chickens. Once you comply, you lose your legal standing. I thanked Marcus and hung up, immediately getting to work on the response letter. As I typed, my phone buzzed with a text from my friend Sarah Mitchell, who lived 3 houses down. "Did you get a letter from the HOA?" her message read. "Yes, about the chickens. Everyone is talking about it. Patricia has been going door to door telling people about your illegal farming operation. She's making it sound like you have a whole barn in your backyard." I groaned. This was exactly what I didn't need. Patricia was turning this into a neighborhood spectacle before I even had a chance to respond formally. The next morning, I woke up early to tend to my chickens as usual. I collected the eggs, cleaned the coop, and made sure their water was fresh. At 7 in the morning, I heard a sharp knock on my front door. When I opened it, Patricia Henderson stood there with two other board members I recognized, Linda Summers and Robert Fitzgerald. Patricia looked like she had stepped out of a country club catalog, with her perfectly coiffed blonde hair and expensive athleisure wear. She held a clipboard against her chest like a shield. "Mr. Warner, we're here for an inspection of your property." I crossed my arms, staying firmly in my doorway. "Do you have an appointment?" "We don't need an appointment. As HOA board members, we have the right to inspect properties for code violations." "Actually, you don't. According to Arizona state law and our own HOA bylaws, you need 24 hours written notice for any inspection, and the homeowner has the right to be present. Since I'm standing right here and you didn't give me notice, this isn't happening." Patricia's face flushed red. "Are you refusing to cooperate with the HOA? I'm requiring you to follow the rules, same as you're requiring of me. If you want to schedule a proper inspection, have your attorney contact my attorney." I handed her Marcus's business card, which I had prepared for exactly this moment. Linda shifted uncomfortably beside Patricia, clearly not expecting confrontation. Robert looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. "This is outrageous," Patricia sputtered. "Your chickens are a nuisance. They're loud, they smell, and they're bringing down property values." "My chickens are quieter than the Johnsons' dogs 3 streets over. They don't smell because I maintain a clean coop. And property values in Meadowbrook have increased 7% since I moved in, according to public records. But none of that matters because my chickens are legally grandfathered under the previous HOA administration." I watched Patricia's jaw clench. She wasn't used to being challenged, that much was clear. "We'll see what the board has to say about this at next week's meeting." "Looking forward to it," I replied calmly and closed the door. Over the next few days, I learned that Patricia had been busy. She had posted about my chickens on the neighborhood Facebook group, started a petition to remove illegal livestock, and even called the county to report me. The county inspector who showed up on Thursday was a friendly guy named Dave who took one look at my setup and shook his head. "Someone really has it out for you," Dave said, making notes on his tablet. "This is one of the cleanest backyard chicken operations I've seen. Everything is up to code. You're actually exceeding most requirements. So I'm good. You're more than good. I'll file my report. Whoever called this in wasted everyone's time." That evening, I made my regular delivery to the Meadowbrook Community Center. The kitchen manager, Gloria Santos, greeted me with her usual warm smile. "Isaac, right on time. I swear your eggs are the highlight of our Sunday brunches. People specifically ask when we're using them." I loaded the cartons onto her counter. "Gloria, I need to ask you something. Has anyone from the HOA ever asked where these eggs come from?" She laughed. "Patricia asks me every other week. I always tell her they're locally sourced from a trusted supplier." "Why?" I explained the situation, watching Gloria's eyes widen with each detail. "Wait, she's trying to shut down your chickens. But these are her favorite eggs. She literally wrote a comment card last month saying our Sunday brunches were the best meal service in the entire Phoenix metro area. She has no idea they're from my chickens." Gloria leaned against the counter, a thoughtful expression crossing her face. "The HOA meeting is next Wednesday, right? Our Sunday brunch is this weekend. What if we made it really special, really showcase those eggs? I wasn't sure where she was going with this, but I liked the way she was thinking. The Sunday brunch at Meadowbrook Community Center was always well attended, but this week, Gloria had pulled out all the stops. She made eggs Benedict, frittatas, custom omelets, and her famous deviled eggs. Every dish prominently featured the eggs from my chickens. I didn't attend because I didn't want to draw attention to myself, but Sarah went and reported back with photos. Patricia had been there, of course, holding court at her usual table with several of her supporters. According to Sarah, she had gone on at length about the eggs, even asking Gloria for the supplier's contact information because she wanted to order some for her own home. Gloria had smiled and said the supplier had a waiting list, which was technically true since I sold eggs to several neighbors on a first-come, first-served basis. The HOA meeting was scheduled for Wednesday evening at 7. I arrived 15 minutes early with Marcus, my lawyer. We had prepared a comprehensive presentation, including all my documentation, the county inspector's report, photos of my coop setup, and testimonials from neighbors who had no issues with my chickens. The community center meeting room was packed. Apparently, word had spread, and people were curious about the chicken controversy. I recognized about 40 residents, far more than usually attended these meetings. Patricia sat at the front table with the other board members, looking supremely confident. She had a folder in front of her that I assumed contained her case against me. The meeting started with routine business, approving minutes from the last meeting, discussing the budget for landscaping improvements, addressing a complaint about someone's lawn furniture. Finally, Patricia cleared her throat. Now we come to the matter of Mr. Isaac Warner and his violation of HOA covenants regarding livestock. She launched into a presentation that painted me as a reckless homeowner who had secretly been operating a farm in my backyard. She showed photos of my coop that she must have taken from the street, though they didn't show much. She claimed that property values would plummet if we allowed chickens. She insisted that this was a clear violation of community standards. And furthermore, Patricia concluded, we cannot allow individual homeowners to simply ignore the rules because they feel entitled to special treatment. The HOA exists to maintain order and protect everyone's investments. When she finished, the board vice president, Janet Crawford, who had been silent throughout, spoke up. Mr. Warner, you have the floor to respond. I stood up, Marcus beside me. I kept my voice calm and factual. Thank you. First, I want to address the issue of rule following. I am not ignoring any rules. My chickens were approved by the previous HOA board under a grandfather clause that was properly documented and filed. I have the meeting minutes right here, dated 2 years ago, showing that Tom Morrison and the entire board at that time voted to approve my request. I projected the documents on the screen, showing the official HOA letterhead and signatures. Second, I have a recent inspection report from the county stating that my chickens exceed all health and safety requirements. There are no code violations, no smell issues, no noise complaints that have been verified. In fact, my noise levels are well below those of several other properties in this neighborhood that have dogs. Patricia tried to interrupt, but Janet held up a hand. Let him finish. Third, regarding property values, I have a report from a licensed real estate appraiser stating that well-maintained backyard chickens have either neutral or slightly positive effects on property values, particularly in communities that value sustainability and local food sources. Meadowbrook actually markets itself as an eco-conscious community, which is part of why I moved here. I saw several heads nodding in the audience. Finally, I want to address the elephant in the room. My chickens produce eggs that I sell to several community members and to this very community center. In fact, the eggs that everyone enjoyed at Sunday brunch yesterday, those came from my 6 Rhode Island Reds. The room went completely silent. I watched Patricia's face drain of color. Gloria, who was sitting in the back, stood up. It's true. Isaac has been our egg supplier for 18 months. The brunches that this community has been raving about, the ones that Patricia herself has praised repeatedly, all use eggs from Isaac's chickens. People started murmuring. I saw several residents pull out their phones, probably checking the neighborhood Facebook group where Patricia had spent the last week complaining about my disgusting chickens. Patricia stood up abruptly. That's irrelevant. The rules are the rules. Then follow them, Marcus said, standing up. The rules clearly state that grandfather clauses approved by previous boards remain valid, unless there is a documented violation of health or safety codes. There is no such violation. You cannot arbitrarily revoke a valid grandfather clause because you personally don't like chickens. Janet looked at Patricia. Did you know about this grandfather clause when you sent the violation notice? Patricia hesitated just a moment too long. I was informed that there might be some documentation, but it seemed irregular. Irregular how? Janet pressed. Tom Morrison ran a very loose ship. I don't consider his approvals to be binding. The room erupted. Several people started talking at once. Marcus leaned over to me and whispered, "She just made a critical mistake." Janet banged the gavel. "Order, please." Patricia, you cannot unilaterally decide that previous board decisions are invalid. That's not how HOAs work. That's not how any governing body works. Robert Fitzgerald, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. I move that we vote to uphold the grandfather clause for Mr. Warner's chickens and rescind the violation notice. I second that motion, said another board member, Michael Torres, who I hadn't expected to support me. Patricia looked panicked. We can't just ignore the concerns of residents who don't want livestock in our neighborhood. Which residents? Someone called from the audience. Because I've been asking around, and nobody seems to have a problem except you. Sarah stood up. I live 3 houses from Isaac. I've never heard his chickens. I've never smelled anything. And I buy eggs from him every week. They're amazing. Another neighbor, Jim Patterson, stood up. My kids love seeing the chickens. Isaac gave them a whole education about where food comes from. This is exactly the kind of thing we should be encouraging in our community. The vote was called. 4 board members voted to uphold my grandfather clause and rescind the violation. Only Patricia voted against it. The motion passed. I felt relief wash over me, but I could see from Patricia's expression that this wasn't over. She gathered her papers with sharp, angry movements. This meeting is adjourned, Janet said, clearly trying to regain some order. As people filed out, several neighbors came up to congratulate me or ask about buying eggs. Gloria gave me a thumbs up from across the room. Marcus packed up his briefcase with a satisfied expression, but Patricia cornered me near the door. You think you've won, she said quietly, her voice tight with anger. But you've made an enemy. I will find a way to get those chickens removed. Miss Henderson, this isn't personal. I just want to keep my legally approved chickens and live my life. Everything is personal in an HOA, Mr. Warner. You'll learn that. She swept past me, leaving a cloud of expensive perfume in her wake. Over the next 2 weeks, I thought maybe Patricia had backed down. The chickens kept laying eggs, I kept making my deliveries, and life returned to normal. Then I got another letter. This time, it wasn't about the chickens directly. It was a notice that the HOA board was implementing new noise ordinances that would go into effect in 30 days. The ordinances specifically prohibited animal sounds before 8 in the morning or after 8 at night. The fine for violations would be $250 per incident. I called Marcus immediately. "She's trying an end run," Marcus said after I read him the notice. "She can't get rid of your chickens directly, so she's going to make it impossible for you to keep them by targeting their normal behavior." "But chickens make noise. That's what they do. They cluck, especially when they lay eggs, which happens throughout the day." "Exactly. This is what we call a targeted regulation. It's designed to look neutral but is actually aimed specifically at you." "Can she do that?" "She can try. But here's the thing. HOA regulations have to be reasonable and applied uniformly. If she's going to ban animal sounds before 8 in the morning, that means no dogs barking, no cats yowling, nothing. And I guarantee you there are plenty of dogs in Meadowbrook that bark early in the morning." Marcus was right. Over the next week, I started documenting every animal sound I heard in the neighborhood before 8 in the morning. The Johnson family's golden retriever barked at joggers every morning at 6:30. The Martinez family's beagle howled whenever squirrels ran across the fence. The Stewarts had a cat that engaged in loud territorial disputes with other neighborhood cats around dawn. I set up a simple recording system and documented everything. If Patricia wanted to enforce noise ordinances, they would apply to everyone. The new noise ordinance was scheduled to be voted on at the next HOA meeting in 3 weeks. But before that meeting could happen, something unexpected occurred. I received an email from Janet Crawford, the board vice president, asking if she could meet with me privately. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop in downtown Phoenix, away from the neighborhood. Janet was in her early 60s, a retired accountant who had moved to Meadowbrook 5 years ago. She had always struck me as fair-minded but conflict-averse. "Isaac, thank you for meeting with me," she said as we sat down with our coffees. "I want to talk to you off the record about what's happening with Patricia." "Okay." Janet took a sip of her latte, gathering her thoughts. "Patricia has become obsessed with your chickens. I mean truly obsessed. She brings them up at every board meeting, even when they're not on the agenda. She's been pressuring the other board members to support increasingly aggressive measures against you." "Why? What did I ever do to her?" "That's what I've been trying to figure out. I did some digging, and I think I found out. Do you know anything about Patricia's background before she moved here?" I shook my head. "She was on the board of her previous HOA in Scottsdale. Apparently, she got into a major legal battle with a neighbor over backyard beekeeping. The neighbor sued the HOA, claimed they were discriminating against sustainable practices, and won a significant settlement. Patricia was personally named in the lawsuit, and while she wasn't found liable, it damaged her reputation. She had to resign from that board." The pieces started clicking together. So when she sees my chickens, she sees that situation all over again. "Exactly. But here's the thing. She's letting her past experience cloud her judgment. The noise ordinance she's proposing is ridiculous and unenforceable. I've been getting calls from residents who are concerned about how it would affect their pets. Robert and Michael are both having second thoughts about supporting it." "So what are you suggesting?" Janet leaned forward. "I think we need to remove Patricia from the board. Not because of your chickens specifically, but because she's no longer acting in the best interests of the community. She's making decisions based on personal vendettas. That's not what an HOA president should do." "How would that work?" "The bylaws allow for a vote of no confidence if 20% of homeowners petition for it. I've been talking to people, and I think we have the support. But I wanted to talk to you first because this will get ugly. Patricia will know you're involved and she'll escalate." I thought about it. Part of me just wanted to keep my head down and avoid more conflict. But another part of me recognized that this was bigger than just my chickens. If Patricia was willing to abuse her power over this, she would do it again over something else. "I'm in," I said. "What do you need from me?" Over the next 10 days, Janet organized quietly. She reached out to homeowners who had been fined or threatened by Patricia over minor infractions. She talked to people who were frustrated with the board's increasingly petty focus on small violations, while ignoring bigger issues like the deteriorating community pool or the broken streetlights on Maple Drive. I helped where I could, but I tried to stay in the background. Sarah was more public in her support, posting on the neighborhood Facebook group about the need for reasonable leadership that focuses on real community issues. Patricia must have sensed something was happening because she accelerated her campaign against me. I started receiving violation notices for increasingly absurd things. My trash cans were visible from the street for 20 minutes after pickup. My car was parked at a slight angle in my driveway. My front yard had 3 weeds that violated the landscaping standards. Each violation came with a fine. Each fine was documented by Marcus for our eventual legal response. The breaking point came on a Saturday morning. I was in my backyard collecting eggs when I heard a commotion from the street. I walked around to the front of my house and saw Patricia standing on the sidewalk with a professional photographer taking pictures of my property. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Documenting violations," Patricia said without looking at me. "Your mailbox is dented. Your house numbers are fading. Your front door needs repainting." My front door was painted 6 months ago. It's the wrong shade according to the approved color palette. I looked at my front door, which was a perfectly normal shade of sage green that matched several other houses in the neighborhood. The photographer looked uncomfortable. "Madam, I'm not sure this is what you hired me for. You said you needed property damage documentation." "Just take the pictures," Patricia snapped. That's when Sarah came out of her house, phone in hand, recording the entire interaction. "Patricia, what are you doing? This is harassment. I'm performing my duties as HOA president. You can record all you want. Mr. Warner is in violation of multiple covenants." More neighbors started coming out, drawn by the commotion. Jim Patterson, the Johnsons, the Martinez family, even old Mrs. Chen, who usually kept to herself. "This is ridiculous," Jim said. "Patricia, you're targeting Isaac and everyone can see it. I'm enforcing the rules equally for everyone." "Really?" "Because my mailbox has been dented for 3 years and I've never gotten a violation notice," Jim shot back. The photographer packed up his equipment. "I'm leaving. This isn't what I signed up for." As he walked away, Patricia's face turned bright red. "You're all going to regret this. Every single one of you. I have the authority to fine any property in this neighborhood, and I will use it." "Actually, you don't," Janet said, emerging from the small crowd that had gathered. "Not unilaterally, and certainly not for personal vendettas." She held up a folder. "I have here a petition signed by 32% of Meadowbrook homeowners calling for a vote of no confidence in your leadership. According to our bylaws, this triggers a special election for HOA president that must be held within 30 days. Patricia snatched the folder and flipped through it, her hands shaking. "This is a coup. This is illegal. It's completely legal and follows the exact procedures outlined in our governing documents, the same documents you've been using to threaten Isaac and others." I watched Patricia's face cycle through emotions: shock, anger, disbelief, and finally calculation. "Fine. Have your election. I'll win because most people in this neighborhood understand the importance of maintaining standards." "We'll see," Janet said calmly. The next 4 weeks were intense. Patricia campaigned like she was running for Congress, sending out glossy mailers about protecting property values and preventing neighborhood decline. She held a town hall where she presented a slideshow about the dangers of residential farming and showed property value statistics from communities that had allowed chickens, carefully cherry-picking data that supported her narrative. Janet ran a quieter campaign focused on practical issues. She promised to redirect HOA resources toward actual community improvements instead of nitpicking violations. She highlighted the need for transparency in board decisions. She emphasized community over conflict. I mostly stayed out of it, but I made sure to document every interaction with the HOA. The violation notices kept coming, each one more petty than the last. Marcus had filed a formal harassment complaint with the state HOA Oversight Board, arguing that Patricia was abusing her position. The Sunday brunches at the community center became a weekly celebration of local food. Gloria created special menus that prominently featured eggs and started mentioning in her announcements that they came from our very own neighborhood supplier. Residents started specifically requesting tables for the brunches, and attendance increased 40%. Patricia stopped coming to the brunches. 3 days before the election, I was in my backyard doing evening chores when I heard my chickens making distressed sounds. I ran to the coop and found the door to their run standing open. 2 of my chickens were missing. My heart pounded as I secured the remaining 4 birds and searched my yard. I found 1 chicken hiding under my deck, terrified but unharmed. The other was gone. I immediately called the police. The officer who responded, a young woman named Officer Ramirez, took my statement and examined the coop. "You have security cameras?" she asked. "I do now." I had installed them after Patricia's photographer incident, but they didn't cover this part of the yard. Any idea who might do something like this? I hesitated. I had suspicions, but no proof. I've been in a dispute with my HOA president. Officer Ramirez raised an eyebrow. Over chickens. Over chickens. She took detailed notes and said she would file a report. As she was leaving, my neighbor Jim came over. "Isaac, I saw something. Around 6:30 I saw a car parked behind your house on the access road. It was only there for about 5 minutes, but it seemed weird." "What kind of car?" "White Mercedes SUV. Patricia drove a white Mercedes SUV. I called Marcus immediately. He advised me to report the information to the police, but warned me not to make any accusations without proof. The next morning, I found my missing chicken. She was in my front yard, placed carefully in a small cardboard box with a note that read, "Found your chicken. Maybe you should take better care of your animals. Patricia Henderson." I took photos of everything and called Officer Ramirez back. She came out again, examined the note, and took it as evidence. "Mr. Warner, this is getting into some concerning territory. If Miss Henderson took your chickens and returned them, that's theft. The fact that she's admitting to it in writing is actually helpful for your case. Can you talk to her? I'll pay her a visit today." I later learned from Janet that Officer Ramirez had indeed visited Patricia, who claimed she found the chicken wandering in the street and was simply being a good neighbor by returning it. She insisted that leaving a note was just being responsible. The police couldn't prove otherwise, but the incident was documented. Election day arrived. The voting was held at the community center from 9 in the morning until 8 at night. Turnout was the highest in Meadowbrook history. 73% of homeowners cast ballots. I voted around noon, then tried to distract myself with work. I was a freelance graphic designer, so I could work from home, but I found it impossible to concentrate. My chickens, safely back to 6 after I had confirmed the returned one was healthy, seemed to sense my anxiety and stayed close to their coop. At 9 that evening, Janet called. "Isaac, it's over. Patricia lost 58% to 42%. She's out." I felt a weight lift off my shoulders that I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. What happens now? We hold a new election for president next week. I'm running, but it's an open process. And Isaac, one of my first acts will be to officially reaffirm your grandfather clause and dismiss all pending violations against you. Thank you, Janet, for everything. Thank me by keeping those chickens happy. I've gotten hooked on those Sunday brunches. I thought that would be the end of it. Patricia would fade away, I would keep my chickens, and life would return to normal. But I underestimated how much Patricia hated losing. 2 days after the election, I received a certified letter. It was from an attorney representing Patricia Henderson personally, not the HOA. The letter informed me that Patricia was suing me for defamation, claiming that I had damaged her reputation in the community and caused her to lose the election through a campaign of lies and harassment. She was seeking $200,000 in damages. I sat in Marcus's office, reading through the lawsuit with growing disbelief. Can she do this? Anyone can file a lawsuit, Marcus said. The question is whether it has merit, and this one doesn't. You didn't defame her. You defended yourself against her harassment. We have documentation of everything. But here's the reality. Defending against a lawsuit, even a frivolous one, costs time and money. So what do? We file a motion to dismiss and countersue for harassment and abuse of process. We ask for attorney's fees. And we make it clear that we're not backing down. Over the next month, the legal battle escalated. Patricia's attorney filed motions. Marcus filed responses. We went through discovery, where both sides had to turn over relevant documents. The discovery process was actually helpful for our case. Patricia had to turn over all her communications regarding me and the HOA. What we found was damning. She had emails with several board members where she explicitly stated her intention to make an example of me. She had researched the costs of fighting legal battles and assumed I wouldn't have the resources to defend myself properly. She had even consulted with the photographer about making my property look worse in photos. Most tellingly, we found emails between Patricia and her friend Margaret, who didn't live in Meadowbrook, where Patricia admitted that the chickens weren't really the issue. She wrote, "It's the principle. These people need to understand that I make the rules. If I let Warner keep his chickens, everyone will think they can do whatever they want." Marcus presented all of this to the judge during the motion to dismiss hearing. Patricia's attorney, a slick guy named Richard Stone, tried to argue that Patricia's communications were taken out of context. Judge Maria Torres was not impressed. "Miss Henderson, I've reviewed the evidence presented by both parties. Mr. Warner's actions were clearly defensive responses to what appears to be a sustained campaign of harassment on your part. There is no defamation here. What I see is a homeowner defending his legal rights against an HOA president who abused her position. Motion to dismiss is granted. Furthermore, I'm awarding Mr. Warner attorney's fees in the amount of $12,000. Patricia's face went white. In the hallway outside the courtroom, she turned to me. "You've destroyed my life. I had to resign from the board. People in the neighborhood won't even look at me. And now I owe you money I don't have." "Patricia, I never wanted any of this. You started it." "All I wanted was to keep my legally approved chickens. Those stupid chickens, I hope they all die." Marcus stepped between us. "Miss Henderson, I'd be very careful about making threats right now. The judge is still in the building." She stormed off, heels clicking on the courthouse floor. Janet was elected HOA president unopposed. Her first board meeting was refreshingly normal. They discussed actual community issues, repairing the pool, fixing streetlights, organizing a neighborhood watch program. There were no witch hunts over mailbox dents or trash can positions. The resolution affirming my grandfather clause for the chickens passed unanimously. All the violation notices Patricia had issued were dismissed. The noise ordinance that targeted animal sounds was scrapped. Life in Meadowbrook started to feel like what it should have been all along. A community of neighbors who actually cared about each other rather than petty rules. But Patricia still owed me $12,000 in attorney's fees, and she wasn't paying. Marcus filed a collections action, and we learned that Patricia was in significant financial trouble. The legal battle had drained her savings. Her husband, Gerald, who I had only met briefly, filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences and financial irresponsibility. 2 months after the judge's ruling, Patricia's house went up for sale. I learned from neighborhood gossip that she was moving back to California to live with her sister. The morning the moving truck arrived at Patricia's house, I was in my backyard with my chickens. They were doing great. All 6 were healthy and producing eggs consistently. I had a waiting list of neighbors who wanted to buy them. Sarah came over with coffee. "It's really over," she said, watching the movers load furniture into the truck. "Yeah, I almost feel bad for her." "Don't. She brought this all on herself. She could have just left you alone." We stood there in comfortable silence, drinking coffee and listening to the chickens cluck. Later that day, I made my regular delivery to the community center. Gloria had expanded the Sunday brunch program and was now doing special events that featured local suppliers. My eggs were always prominently displayed with a little sign that said, "Fresh from Warner Family Chickens." "Isaac, I have some news," Gloria said as I unloaded the cartons. The Phoenix Sustainable Living Association wants to feature our brunch program in their newsletter. They specifically want to highlight your chickens as an example of successful urban agriculture. That's amazing. Would you be willing to do an interview? They want to hear about your experience with the HOA and how it resolved. I thought about it. Part of me wanted to just move on and forget the whole thing. But another part recognized that sharing the story might help other people dealing with similar situations. Sure, I'll do it. The article came out 3 weeks later. It was a balanced piece that talked about the benefits of backyard chickens, the challenges of HOA regulations, and the importance of community engagement. They quoted me extensively, and they also quoted Janet about how Meadowbrook had learned the importance of reasonable governance. The article got picked up by several local news outlets. I did a brief interview with a Phoenix television station, standing in my backyard with my chickens pecking around my feet. The segment was lighthearted and positive, focusing on the eggs and the community benefits rather than the conflict with Patricia. After the segment aired, I got emails from people all over Arizona dealing with similar HOA issues. Some were about chickens, but others were about solar panels, vegetable gardens, or clotheslines. The common thread was HOA boards that prioritized aesthetics over practicality and personal preference over common sense. Marcus suggested I connect people with resources. Arizona's HOA laws, template letters for fighting violations, contacts for local attorneys who specialized in HOA disputes. It became a small side project that I found surprisingly fulfilling. 6 months after Patricia moved away, Meadowbrook held its annual community picnic. It was a gorgeous spring day in Phoenix, warm but not yet brutally hot. The picnic was held at the community park, with families bringing dishes to share. I brought deviled eggs made with my chickens' eggs. They were gone within 20 minutes. Janet gave a short speech about the importance of community and working together. She announced several successful initiatives. The pool had been renovated, new streetlights were installed throughout the neighborhood, and a community garden was being planned for the empty lot on the corner of Elm and Fifth. And I want to give special recognition to Isaac Warner, Janet said, gesturing toward me. His situation with the previous board taught us all an important lesson about the difference between rules that serve the community and rules that serve personal agendas. Thanks to Isaac's willingness to stand up for what was right, we're now a stronger, more united neighborhood. People clapped. Some neighbors came over to shake my hand or ask about buying eggs. Kids asked if they could visit the chickens sometime. I said yes, of course, as long as their parents came with them. As the sun set over the Phoenix suburbs, I stood with Sarah, Jim, and several other neighbors, watching kids play on the playground equipment. My phone buzzed with a text from Gloria. Next Sunday brunch sold out in 2 hours. Your eggs are famous. I smiled and put my phone away. In the distance, I could hear a dog barking, kids laughing, and the general pleasant noise of a community that was actually functioning the way it should. The next morning, I woke up early as usual to tend to my chickens. The Arizona sunrise painted the sky in shades of orange and pink. My 6 Rhode Island Reds greeted me with their usual chorus of clucks, expecting their breakfast. As I collected eggs and refreshed their water, I thought about everything that had happened over the past year. The stress, the legal battles, the confrontations. All of it had started because Patricia couldn't accept that someone had chickens in their backyard. But it had ended with a stronger community, better HOA leadership, and people actually talking to each other instead of sending violation notices. I carried the eggs inside and washed them carefully. 3 dozen today, all beautiful brown eggs with rich yellow yolks. Some would go to neighbors, some to the community center, and some I would keep for myself. My phone rang. It was Marcus. Isaac, I wanted to let you know that we finally collected the attorney's fees from Patricia. The full $12,000. It's being deposited into your account today. That's great, Marcus. Thank you for everything. Thank you for being a client who actually stands up for himself. Most people would have just removed the chickens and moved on. I thought about it, I admitted, but these chickens are part of my life. They're not hurting anyone. It seemed wrong to give them up just because someone didn't like them. After hanging up, I sat at my kitchen table and did the math. The attorney's fees covered most of what I had spent fighting Patricia. Between the egg sales and the settlement, I had actually come out slightly ahead financially. But more than that, I had proven a point. HOAs exist to serve homeowners, not to give petty people power over their neighbors. When HOAs forget that, homeowners have the right and responsibility to push back. Over the next few weeks, life continued its new normal rhythm. Janet proved to be an excellent HOA president, focused on practical issues and community building. The board meetings were productive and actually addressed things residents cared about. The community garden project moved forward, with several neighbors volunteering to help design and build it. They asked for my input on composting and sustainable practices. I was happy to help. One Saturday afternoon, I was in my backyard building a new nesting box for my chickens when I heard the doorbell. When I answered it, I found a young couple I didn't recognize. "Hi, I'm David, and this is my wife, Rachel. We just bought the Henderson house." We shook hands. They seemed nice in their early 30s, casually dressed. "We heard about what happened with the previous owner and the HOA," Rachel said. "We actually think it's great that the neighborhood allows chickens. We were thinking about getting some ourselves." I couldn't help but laugh. The irony is amazing. Patricia fought so hard against my chickens, and now the people who bought her house want chickens too. "Would you be willing to show us your setup?" David asked. "We've never kept chickens before, but we want to learn." I spent the next hour giving them a complete tutorial on backyard chickens. Coop design, feed requirements, health considerations, dealing with predators and collecting eggs. They took notes and asked smart questions. The key thing, I told them, is to check with the HOA first. Get everything in writing. Make sure you understand the rules and follow them. That way you're protected. We already talked to Janet, Rachel said. She was very helpful. She gave us copies of the grandfather clause provisions and the current regulations. As long as we meet the requirements for coop size and setbacks, we're good to go. That's the way it should work, I said. They left with a list of resources and my phone number in case they had questions. As I watched them walk back to their new home, I felt a sense of satisfaction. The neighborhood that Patricia had tried to control with an iron fist was now becoming a place where people could pursue sustainable living and community connections. A month later, David and Rachel got 4 chickens, 2 barred rocks and 2 buff Orpingtons. I helped them set up their coop and gave them tips on acclimating the chickens to their new home. Their backyard bordered the community park, so kids would often stop to look at the chickens through the fence. The Meadowbrook Community Garden officially opened in May. 20 families had plots, growing everything from tomatoes to herbs to flowers. There was a shared composting system, and I donated my chicken manure, which made excellent fertilizer. The Sunday brunches at the community center had become a neighborhood institution. Gloria had added Friday evening farm to table dinners that were equally popular. Between my eggs and produce from the community garden, the meals showcased what the neighborhood could do when people worked together. In June, Janet asked me to join the HOA board. I was hesitant at first, remembering all the drama, but Sarah convinced me. "You understand better than anyone how HOAs should work," she said. "And you have the respect of the neighborhood. You'd be great." I agreed to run, and I won easily. My first board meeting was a stark contrast to the ones during Patricia's tenure. We discussed plans for a neighborhood 4th of July celebration, approved a request for someone to install solar panels, and reviewed the budget for maintaining common areas. When a request came in from a homeowner wanting to paint their front door a non-standard color, we looked at photos, confirmed it wasn't garishly out of place, and approved it. The whole discussion took 5 minutes. "That's how it should be," Michael Torres said. "Pick your battles. Focus on things that actually matter." Everyone agreed. The 4th of July celebration was a huge success. We held it at the community park with a potluck dinner, games for kids, and fireworks after dark. I brought my famous deviled eggs, which were gone before I even set the plate down. As I stood watching the fireworks with Sarah and other neighbors, I reflected on how much had changed in just over a year. The neighborhood that had been torn apart by petty conflicts and power trips was now a genuine community where people knew each other, helped each other, and actually enjoyed living together. My chickens, the innocent cause of all the drama, continued their blissfully unaware existence, laying eggs and pecking at bugs in my backyard. In August, I got an unexpected email. It was from Patricia's ex-husband, Gerald. "Isaac, I hope it's okay that I'm reaching out. I wanted to apologize for everything that happened. I was dealing with my own issues and didn't stand up to Patricia when I should have. I've since learned about the full extent of what she put you through. I'm sorry. Also, I wanted you to know that Patricia is getting help. She was diagnosed with an anxiety disorder that was going untreated for years. The obsessive behavior and control issues were symptoms that got worse over time. It doesn't excuse what she did, but I thought you should know she's working on it. I hope you and your chickens are doing well. Gerald Henderson." I stared at the email for a long time. Part of me was still angry about everything Patricia had put me through, but another part felt sad for her. Mental health issues were real, and if that had been driving her behavior, it explained a lot. I wrote back, "Gerald, thank you for reaching out. I appreciate the apology. I'm glad Patricia is getting help. The chickens and I are doing fine. The neighborhood is doing well too. I wish you both the best. Isaac." It felt good to close that chapter with something other than anger. As summer turned to fall, the Phoenix heat finally broke. The chickens appreciated the cooler weather and their egg production increased. I had to expand my customer base to keep up with supply. The Meadowbrook Community Garden had a harvest festival in October. People brought produce they had grown, and we had cooking demonstrations showing how to use the vegetables. I did a presentation on the benefits of backyard chickens and had several people sign up for a waiting list for chicks the following spring. David and Rachel's chickens had started laying, and they were thrilled. Their kids, a 6-year-old daughter and a 4-year-old son, had taken to chicken keeping with enthusiasm. They had named all 4 chickens and treated them like pets. In November, the Arizona HOA Oversight Board completed their investigation into Patricia's conduct as HOA president. They issued a report finding that she had violated several state regulations regarding proper HOA governance, including retaliatory actions against homeowners and abuse of enforcement authority. The report was public record and served as a warning to other HOA boards about the consequences of similar behavior. Marcus sent me a copy with a note. "This is vindication. Your case is now precedent that will help other homeowners." The holidays came, and Meadowbrook did them right. We had a neighborhood decorating contest that was judged on creativity rather than strict adherence to approved color schemes. We had a Christmas caroling night where families walked the streets singing and drinking hot chocolate. The community center held a New Year's Eve party that was family-friendly and well-attended. I brought the chickens inside their coop early on New Year's Eve, so they wouldn't be disturbed by the noise. As midnight approached, I stood in my backyard looking at the coop I had built, the home I had defended, and the community I had helped transform. My phone buzzed with text messages from neighbors. "Happy New Year. Thanks for everything you did for our neighborhood. Your eggs made my holiday brunch amazing." I smiled and texted back responses. At midnight, fireworks lit up the Phoenix sky, and I could hear cheering from houses up and down the street. The next morning, January 1st, I woke up early and went out to check on the chickens. They had weathered the fireworks just fine and greeted me with their usual enthusiasm. I collected eggs, gave them fresh food and water, and spent a few minutes just watching them. These 6 chickens had been at the center of a neighborhood war. They had been threatened, stolen, and returned. They had been the subject of HOA meetings, legal battles, and news articles. And through it all, they had just kept being chickens, doing what chickens do, completely oblivious to the human drama surrounding them. I gathered the eggs and headed inside to make breakfast. As I cracked the first egg into the pan, I appreciated its deep yellow yolk and firm white. These weren't just eggs. They were a symbol of standing up for what was right, of communities choosing cooperation over conflict, and of the simple truth that sometimes the best answer to unreasonable demands is a calm and firm no. My phone rang. It was Gloria from the community center. "Isaac, I know it's New Year's Day, but I wanted to catch you before you made other plans. We're doing a special brunch today and we're completely out of eggs. Any chance you could do an emergency delivery?" I looked at the basket of fresh eggs on my counter. "I have 3 dozen here. I can bring them over in an hour. You're a lifesaver. These eggs have become the signature of our brunches. People specifically request them." After delivering the eggs, I drove home through the quiet streets of Meadowbrook. The neighborhood looked peaceful in the morning light. Kids were playing with new Christmas toys in front yards. Neighbors were out walking dogs. Someone had planted new flowers in the community garden beds. This was what an HOA neighborhood could be when it focused on community instead of control, when it solved problems instead of creating them, when it empowered homeowners instead of threatening them. I pulled into my driveway and sat for a moment, just appreciating the normalcy of it all. No violation notices waiting on my door. No angry HOA president documenting imaginary infractions. No lawyers or court dates or neighborhood drama. Just a home, some chickens, and a community that had learned to work together. As I walked to my backyard to do some afternoon chores, I could hear my chickens clucking contentedly. The sound made me smile. Those clucks had been labeled as noise violations and nuisances. Now they were just the pleasant background sound of a well-lived life. I opened the coop to let the chickens into their run for the afternoon. They hurried out, eager to scratch in the dirt and hunt for bugs. I had added some new enrichment items to their run. A log for them to perch on, a dust bath area, and some hanging vegetables for them to peck at. These chickens lived better than many chickens in America. They had space, enrichment, quality food, and an owner who actually cared about their well-being. And in return, they gave me eggs that had become famous in my neighborhood. That evening, I sat on my back porch with a beer, watching the sunset. The chickens were settling into their coop for the night, making their soft evening sounds. The temperature was perfect, that brief window of Phoenix winter when it is neither too hot nor too cold. My phone buzzed with an email from the Phoenix Sustainable Living Association. They wanted to know if I would speak at their annual conference about urban chicken keeping and dealing with HOA regulations. They offered a small honorarium and said my story had inspired dozens of people to pursue backyard chickens in their own neighborhoods. I wrote back and accepted. If my experience could help other people avoid the drama I had gone through, or give them the courage to stand up for their rights, it was worth sharing. As winter progressed into early spring, life continued its comfortable rhythm. The chickens molted and grew new feathers. The community garden prepared for spring planting. Janet's HOA board continued to govern sensibly and effectively. In March, I spoke at the Sustainable Living Association conference. The room was packed with about 200 people, and my story resonated. During the question period, several people shared their own HOA horror stories. Others asked practical questions about chicken keeping and legal protections. After the presentation, a woman in her 50s approached me. "Mr. Warner, thank you for sharing your experience. I'm on my HOA board in Temp, and we've been getting requests for backyard chickens. I was inclined to just say no because I thought it would be too much trouble. But hearing your story, I realize we should be looking for ways to say yes, with reasonable regulations." "That's exactly right," I told her. "The question shouldn't be how can we prevent this, it should be how can we allow this safely and responsibly." She took notes and thanked me again. In April, David and Rachel's chickens produced their first eggs. They brought one over to show me, as proud as if they had laid it themselves. Their kids were ecstatic, carefully carrying the egg like it was made of glass. "We never would have done this if we hadn't seen your setup," Rachel said. "This has been such a great experience for our family." That same month, the community garden held a spring planting day. Over 50 residents showed up to help prepare beds, plant seeds, and spread compost. My chicken manure was in high demand as fertilizer. The garden coordinator joked that I should start charging for it. May brought the 1-year anniversary of Patricia's departure from Meadowbrook. I didn't mark the occasion in any special way, but I did reflect on how much had changed. The neighborhood that had been so divided was now united. The HOA that had been a source of stress was now a source of support. And my chickens, the innocent catalysts of all this change, continued to lay eggs and live their best chicken lives, completely unconcerned with human drama. Summer arrived with its brutal Phoenix heat. I made sure the chickens had plenty of shade and cool water. They slowed down their laying during the hottest months, which was normal. Gloria adjusted the community center menu to account for the reduced supply. In July, Janet announced that she would not seek re-election as HOA president. She had done what she set out to do, stabilizing the board and refocusing on community needs. She recommended that I run for president. I thought about it seriously. Being on the board had been positive, but being president was a bigger commitment. However, I also recognized that I had credibility in the neighborhood and a clear vision for what the HOA should be. I decided to run. My opponent was a newer resident named Thomas Pratt, who had good intentions but little experience with HOA governance. The election in August was civil and focused on actual issues. I won with 67% of the vote. My first act as HOA president was to propose a comprehensive update to our covenants, conditions, and restrictions. The existing rules were outdated and often contradictory. We formed a committee of residents to review every regulation and ask whether it actually served the community's interests. The process took 3 months. We held community forums where residents could voice opinions. We researched best practices from other HOAs. We consulted with attorneys to make sure our new rules complied with Arizona law. The final document was half the length of the original and focused on genuine health, safety, and aesthetic concerns rather than petty control. We explicitly allowed backyard chickens with reasonable regulations. Maximum of 10 birds, no roosters, proper coop maintenance, and setback requirements from property lines. We also allowed vegetable gardens, solar panels, clotheslines, and rainwater collection systems. We updated the approved color palettes for house paint to include modern options. We eliminated most of the ridiculous rules that had accumulated over the years. The new CCRs were approved by 89% of homeowners in a vote held in November. It was the highest participation rate in Meadowbrook history. As the year drew to a close, I looked back on everything that had happened since that first violation notice arrived about my chickens. What had started as a simple conflict over backyard birds had transformed into a complete reimagining of how our HOA functioned. The Sunday brunches at the community center continued to thrive. The community garden was producing year-round in the Phoenix climate. Neighbors knew each other and actually helped each other. The HOA board focused on real issues rather than manufactured problems. And my chickens, now famous throughout the neighborhood and beyond, continued their important work of turning feed into delicious eggs. On Christmas morning, I went out early to check on the chickens. Phoenix was experiencing a rare cold snap, and I wanted to make sure they were comfortable. They were fine, huddled together in their coop, warm and content. I collected the few eggs they had laid and headed inside to make Christmas breakfast. Later, neighbors would start arriving for our annual Christmas brunch, a tradition that had started the previous year and had grown to include over 20 families. Everyone would bring dishes to share. I was making quiche with my chicken's eggs, naturally. Gloria was bringing her famous cinnamon rolls. David and Rachel were bringing fruit salad. Other families were bringing various breakfast items and treats. As people arrived and the house filled with laughter and conversation, I stood back and watched. This was what community was supposed to be. This was what an HOA was supposed to facilitate, not prevent. Sarah raised her mimosa glass in a toast. to Isaac and his chickens, who taught us all that standing up for what's right is worth the fight. Everyone cheered and drank. I felt my face flush with embarrassment but also pride. Later, as I walked some guests out to see the chickens, several kids in tow, I thought about how close I had come to just giving up and removing the chickens when Patricia first demanded it. If I had done that, none of this would have happened. The neighborhood would still be under the thumb of petty HOA tyranny. The community garden wouldn't exist. The Sunday brunches would be using inferior eggs. But I had stood my ground, fought the right fight, and won not just for myself but for everyone. The chickens clucked and pecked at the ground, doing exactly what chickens do, blissfully unaware that they had changed a neighborhood and proved that sometimes the smallest things are worth the biggest fights.